Thank you for joining us again on Gods, Demons, and Magic. This is your host, Sri Sachinandan Das. So today we'll continue our exploration of the Egyptian mysteries by Iamblichus. In our previous episode, we discussed the origin of the text and the philosophical school of Iamblichus and his reverence for the Egyptian priesthood. And as mentioned, the text begins with many different questions presented to Anibo, the Egyptian priest. One of them is, in what does a daemon differ from a hero or half-god or from a soul? Is it an essence and power or an energy? So essentially, Porphyry is asking, what are the natures of these different types of beings? What is the nature of the gods? What are the daemons? What are the heroes or half-gods? What is the soul? How do all these different things compare to each other? Now, there's something very interesting here, in that there's this essential classification that we see. There's definitely a realm of gods. There's definitely a realm of daemons. There's a realm of heroes. There's a realm of half-gods. There's all these different types of living beings. And you'll find that all throughout the various traditions of the world. And what's incredible is that they all basically have the same classifications. Generally, what you'll find in the various cultures of the world, in both hemispheres, is you'll find an understanding of a supreme God, a one God that's transcendental to the world. Various types of cultures and peoples will perceive of that one God differently at different times. They'll have different names for the one God. For example, just as there's different names for the sun. In Spanish, it's Sol, and in Hindi or Sanskrit, it's Surya, but it's all referring to the same object or entity. So, in the same way, you'll find all sorts of different names throughout the world for this one transcendent supreme God. And you'll also find different levels of attention on that God. For example, in Native American cultures, there's an understanding of that one supreme God, but they don't pay attention too much. He's there, and there may be one particular place devoted to his worship, but for the most part they'll worship gods or demigods or sub-gods that exist within the realm of nature. The one supreme God is oftentimes considered transcendental to nature, and the many different gods are aspects of nature itself and sort of the very fabric of reality. Oftentimes they are closely working as part of creation itself, and it's their job to maintain the material universe. And so most cultures in the world, even with an understanding of one transcendent God, they'll put their attention onto the demigods. So you'll see that there is a distinction. There's a one transcendent God, and then there's many, many different gods of nature and different aspects of material reality. And then you'll find generally another realm beneath that, which they're also considered gods, but they're of a lesser classification. You might find different entities, for example, within the European tradition, like elves. Within the Indian tradition, you have the Upadevas, who are celestial musicians, celestial dancers, and they exist more or less as a kind of assistant to the gods. Their role is they have the same character as the gods in that they're supernatural entities. They're beyond or higher than human beings, and yet these particular entities are not on the level of gods that are controllers of nature. They're not on the level of powerful forces such as the god of fire, or the god of the sun, or the god of the moon, but rather they are higher entities. And then beneath them you'll actually have a level of protector spirits, and this is also in this particular text Iamblichus asks about them later as well, or rather Porphyry asks about them. What is their particular nature of these guardian daemons, he calls them. And you'll find these particular spirits, interestingly enough, it's a certain classification that's shared throughout the world as well. Beneath the Supreme Lord, and then the demigods, and then what you can be called like sub-gods or smaller gods, you'll find guardian spirits or nature spirits. For example, in Shinto, you'll find a lot of these spirits of a mountain or spirits of a forest. They're gods associated with certain places in nature, a river, a god of a river. And so these particular spirits are considered also gods, but of a lower category. And oftentimes they'll have a role of protection as well. For example, in India, it's quite interesting. In fact, India is a very interesting place because you can still find this culture that existed in ancient Egypt and throughout, the Mediterranean and the Near East. It's very much still preserved. And so once you go outside the major cities, you'll actually find villages where these very things are being practiced to this day, and also in other places as well, like Central Asia, and even some of these traditions continue in Eastern Europe and places like that. And so you'll find these protector spirits being worshipped. You might have, for example, in a village in India, they will have a small temple on the inside as you come in the village, and the village deity is there. And you worship this village deity. He protects the temple. They're called yakshas. And so the yakshas, these protector spirits, they're considered guardians. Like the whole village will come forward and offer them regularly fruits or food or whatever it may be and try to please this particular spirit. And in exchange, they ask the spirit protect their village from natural disasters, or protect their village from robbers and thieves that may come try to attack them. And you'll find that this particular protector spirit, oftentimes they have a fearsome visage. They look very dangerous and like they're angry or wild. You could see this, for example, in Tibetan traditions. You have the various yakshas that are there. If you've seen the pictures, they have big bulging eyes and flames coming all around them, and they're dancing and carrying weapons. So these are yakshas, they're protector spirits. You also see this tradition even in South America, even to this day. You'll find in sort of the Santeria religion and various religious practices similar, you'll find a protector spirits of, for example, a village. Like I have one friend, he's from El Salvador, and when in the small town that he comes from, which is a small town deep in the jungle, they actually worship a protector spirit known as El Patron Santiago. He looks like a 17th or 18th century European man riding a horse, wearing sort of like a colonial, almost like a Napoleonic style military outfit, and he has like a raised sword. And they definitely, they sort of consider him a saint or something like that. He's not canonized by the Catholic Church or anything, but he's considered a protector of that village, and they worship him. And many times you'll hear it. They'll tell stories about El Patron Santiago. They prayed to him, and then he protected him in this way. So, the point being made is that regardless of whether it's acknowledged or not, you'll find that people all over the world have these various distinctions. No matter what their religious tradition, you'll find again and again this stratification of the subtle world comes back again and again and again. And so you'll find this tendency for protector spirits. In fact, in Catholicism, you have many of the different saints. They really have taken on the role of the protector spirit. You'll have each saint is designated a particular field in which they'll protect you. This is the patron saint of children. This is the patron saint of shipping and mercantile exchange. This is the patron saint of doctors. This is the patron saint of, people on the battlefield, right? Porphyry also asks about the hero worship. And so hero worship is quite common in the Greco-Roman world, especially worshipping heroes from the Iliad, such as Achilles and Hector. And the Iliad is quite interesting, is a sort of a history of the Greek people, but within that history it's more of a religious text. It contains all of their values, the different stories and tales told there. They're impregnated with the religious teachings that are passed down from generation to generation. What are the various qualities of character that one should develop? And the individuals that most often represent those particular qualities and characters are individuals like Achilles and Hector and Ajax and all these amazing characters. You'll find the same tradition all over the world with, for example, in India you have the Mahabharata with Arjuna and Bhima, Sahadev, Nakula, Yudhishthira, all these great heroes who in many ways are exhibitions of religious principles that form an inspiration for the common people who like to come together and would be entertained, whereas we have the internet or we have television. They would be entertained in the evening times by storytellers who, again, told the stories such as in Beowulf and the Arthurian legends, and all of these ancient tales were used to be the traditional entertainment, but it was also the via medium of religious teaching. In fact, the Druid priests, one particular branch of the Druid priesthood, that was their sole job, was to memorize and tell again the stories of the heroes. And you'll see also in the Germanic tradition you have Siegfried and those different stories as well. So these great heroes then were also worshipped within the Greco-Roman culture. In fact, Alexander the Great, when he and Phaeston first came into, where the city of Troy used to be, they engaged in the worship of Achilles. Alexander considered him to be his ancestor. And Alexander himself in Alexandria, the very city that we're primarily discussing, was himself worshipped as a hero. So these sort of half-gods who have they have a god is either a father or mother, and the other parent is a human being, are featured prominently within Greco-Roman worship. And we'll talk about that a bit more as time goes on. And within the hierarchy of being, beneath these heroes or half-gods, you would find human beings. And beneath this realm of existence where we live, you find many other different types of entities. You have demons, you have ancestor spirits, you have ghosts of the dead. So these different types of beings were also worshipped by different individuals for different purposes throughout time. So we'll discuss that also in the future as well. And the demons are much different than you'll find in the Judeo-Christian tradition, where they're depicted as opposing God or inherently evil. Rather, you'll find in most traditions of the world, and there is a distinction oftentimes between daemon and demon. The daemons are considered very powerful creatures, especially in the Indian tradition. They're considered powerful as gods. They're considered embodiments of different ferocious qualities within nature, but they're not necessarily evil. They may, in a sense, be opposed to religious order within society, but they themselves are often depicted as very heroic and powerful, and especially practiced in the different material arts, technological arts, how to build things and create things, as well as being endowed with tremendous mystic power. And one of their main qualities is they're opposed to the gods, and they fight against the gods. You'll see this in Greek traditions with the Titans and with the giants of the Nordic traditions. They're always opposed to the demigods and fighting with the demigods. But nevertheless, in these different magical traditions, as for example with the Goetic demons and the Key of Solomon, then which is used to manipulate them and control them, then you'll see that these demons are not necessarily considered evil as much as they are powerful forces, powerful beings that are almost like gods themselves, that one then comes and asks for material things, for material power, material knowledge. But it's always with some warning. They're considered very dangerous, unpredictable, very egotistic, easily angered. So those particular types of entities are there. You'll also find ancestor spirits. We can spend some time talking about that in depth. All over the world you'll find the tradition of worshipping one's ancestors. And the importance of that. It's there in ancient Egypt. It's there in the Greco-Roman world. It's there in India. There's very precise rituals that are performed to this day to satisfy and placate the ancestors. And these certain rituals, you perform them, and essentially in the realm of the ancestors, where the ancestors live, then that small ritual that you perform, it transforms into wealth in their abode. And so there's very precise rules and things how that's achieved, but basically a small form of worship on this particular realm, it sort of springs throughout the cosmos and becomes something big in another dimension of reality. And so we can discuss these things too. And of course there's ghosts and the spirits of the dead. And generally this is, along with the worship of the demons, this is considered black magic, when people worship ghosts, but you'll find that as well all over the world. Especially even today, if you go to India, you can find many trees, and all throughout Tibet, for example, many trees where people will tie things like a little ribbon on the tree, or they'll put a little note. Even in Japan and different places, they'll put a little note with a prayer and they'll stick it in the tree. And the idea is there's a ghost living in that tree, and the ghost isn't necessarily mean or bad. He'll fulfill your desires, if he feels like it. So you can offer a prayer, put it in the tree, and the ghost may respond. So you'll find this type of ghost worship going on as well as in black magic. There's many different rituals and things associated with the dead. There's different sacrificial performances that are done. Like one would light a fire in the mouth of a corpse and offer certain things within that mouth and perform certain meditations in order to gain powers. So there is a very strong element of worshiping the dead. You'll see the Agora, for example, in India do this, and various black magic traditions. Sort of the Western idea of magic, of the witch in the middle of the cemetery in the middle of the night. So there's actually traditions which are very much just that. You'll find in Mexico, the brujeria, these different individuals who perform rituals associated primarily with the dead and the ghosts of the dead, and utilizing the ghosts of the dead to do things. In fact, in India, there's various magical traditions where it's not necessarily dark, but they utilize ghosts to accomplish things. For example, there's traditions of snake charmers, that when someone is bitten by a snake, they'll actually take the person, and the person's dying of a cobra bite, and they'll summon a ghost, and they'll actually bring the ghost into that person's body, and the ghost will locate that poison and actually push it right back out of the wound. In fact, I know somebody that's directly, personally seen this. The individual has the 2 puncture marks in their arm, and the snake charmer is actually holding the arm and chanting these mantras, chanting these prayers, which are essentially, he has some ghosts within his power, and he calls them into the body. And then you'll see, whereas the individual is, sure to die from this poison, the actual white, milky poison right from the fangs of the snake, it actually comes oozing out of the 2 holes until the individual regains consciousness. So this sort of harnessing of the ghosts of the dead, that's an entire another practice of magic. And you'll find this also within the Greco-Roman tradition, especially it's famously there in the Odyssey, when Odysseus goes into the West and he performs the ritual of summoning the dead. And the ritual he performs, the chthonic ritual, is very similar to the various forms of black magic that we see to this day. He actually makes a blood sacrifice in a pit, and then from the power of that blood, or the coming to drink that blood, you find the various spirits are attracted to it, and he's able to speak with the dead. So we'll talk about these different traditions as well. And these same classifications are mentioned in the ancient texts of India. In fact, Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, mentions in this ancient verse, Yajante hi sattvaka devan raksha raksham sirajasaha pritan bhuta gunam shchanye yajante tamasa janaha. Men in the mode of goodness worship the demigods, those in the mode of passion worship the demons, and those in the mode of ignorance worship ghosts and spirits. So even within the yogic texts of ancient India, which are their description of the path of moving upwards towards transcendence, or the path of moving towards divinity, there's a very clear distinction of the different modes of worship, this kind of stratification of the cosmos into different beings, and how to interact with those different beings, and how worship of those different beings leads to different results. And so we'll talk about that sort of thing as well. And in those particular texts, in these yogic texts, there's an emphasis on one's personal qualification. What makes one actually interested in worshiping these different creatures? What is one's personal quality? What is it about oneself? What is one's nature that causes one to interact with these different levels of beings, and ultimately, after death, go to those different beings? So, throughout this podcast, that's our intention, is to discuss these different levels of beings within the cosmos, the gods, the demigods, the heroes, the upadevas or sub-demigods, as well as the ancestors, the daemons, and the ghosts and spirits and the world of the undead, and what are the different rituals and ceremonies used throughout various cultures to interact with these different levels of beings, and how these different cultures all shared the same basic vision of the cosmos. In the next episode, we'll discuss the various oracles of the ancient world, such as the Oracle of Delphi, and practices such as reading omens and astrology. So thank you very much for listening. If you found value in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope you will join us next time on Gods, Demons, and Magic.